At this very moment in our own sky, a faint red object is moving through the darkness of space. It drifts among the outer planets, following a path that does not belong to the Sunday. Astronomers have named it 3I Atlas, or simply Atlas, the third interstellar object ever observed by humankind. Yet to many, its sudden appearance feels strangely familiar, as though a forgotten chapter of our history has begun to stir again. Could this wandering body be the ancient world once known as Nibiru? And if it is, could its return mean that the Anunnaki have come back to watch what they once began? In July 2025, NASA's Atlas survey in Hawaii detected a faint red glow near the edge of the solar system. At first, it appeared to be a distant comet, another traveller drawn briefly into our view. But its movement told a different story. The orbit was hyperbolic, which meant it was not bound to the Sunday. It had come from the deep interstellar dark, passing once through our neighbourhood before vanishing again into the void. To astronomers, it represents a glimpse of something ancient, an object older than the sun itself. To others, it has inspired comparisons to ancient legends, a quiet echo of a story written long before telescopes ever searched the heavens. Thousands of years ago, the people of ancient Sumer spoke of a celestial body that crossed the sky only once in many ages. According to later interpretations of Sumerian mythology, this world was called Nibiru, the planet of the crossing. When Nibiru appeared, the balance of the world shifted. Great floods rose, cities fell, and the gods descended once more to walk among humankind. The Sumerians believed these beings, the Anunnaki, had come from that distant world. They were said to be the architects of early civilization, the ones who taught writing, agriculture, and the order of the stars. When their planet disappeared into the darkness again, the gods too departed, leaving humankind to grow under the memory of their presence. Now, in our own age, another red traveller moves across the heavens. Its name is new, its discovery grounded in modern science, yet the feeling it evokes is ancient. The same questions that haunted the priests of Sumer return to us again. What is this object? Why has it come? And why now, at a time when humanity stands at the threshold of exploring the stars for itself? Perhaps Atlas is nothing more than a fragment of cosmic debris, a relic from another star system crossing our path by chance. Or perhaps it is part of a much older rhythm, one that echoes through both myth and astronomy, reminding us that history may not move in a straight line. The truth could lie somewhere between science and memory, between what we can measure and what we can only sense. Tonight, we follow that mystery through the lens of both fact and legend. We trace its path from NASA's observatories to the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia. Could these two be connected? Could Atlas be the same kind of celestial traveller that carried the gods from the stars to Earth? Earlier, we made a full video about planet Nibiru. You can watch it on our channel after this story. If this is your first time here, please like and subscribe so you do not miss future explorations into ancient mysteries and forbidden history. Share your thoughts below. If you believe Atlas could be Nibiru, type 1. If you think it is only another comet, type 2. Please note, this story is constructed by combining verified astronomical data with ancient historical accounts and speculative hypotheses. It is meant to offer a broader and more imaginative perspective. We do not claim any of these interpretations as absolute truth, and this content does not represent the mainstream view of the scientific community. Before we can ask whether Atlas could truly be Nibiru, we first have to understand what Atlas actually is. In July 2025, a quiet alert appeared on NASA's monitoring system in Hawaii. The Atlas survey had detected a faint red light moving slowly against the background of stars near the outer edge of the solar system. At first, astronomers assumed it was just another comet, one of the countless icy fragments that drift endlessly through space. But as they traced its motion, something did not fit. The object was not orbiting the Sunday. It was passing through. A visitor, not a resident. Further calculations revealed a hyperbolic trajectory, the unmistakable signature of an interstellar object. It had entered our system from deep space, drawn briefly toward the sun's gravity, and would soon leave forever. This made it only the third object of its kind ever recorded by humanity, after one I Oumuamua in 2017 and two I Borisov in 2019. Its official name became 3I Atlas, the third interstellar object discovered by the Atlas survey. The first thing that caught astronomers' attention was its colour. It glowed faintly red, not from heat but from sunlight reflecting off a surface covered in ancient dust. That colour was unusual even for comets. When telescopes captured its spectrum, the data revealed something stranger still, traces of nickel and carbon compounds forming a molecule called nickel carbonyl. No previously studied natural comet had ever shown this combination before. It hinted at a violent and distant origin, material forged in the heart of a dying star, or the remains of a world long since destroyed. Using its brightness and motion, scientists estimated its age. The result was astonishing. At more than 7 billion years old, Atlas may be older than the Sun itself, older than Earth, older than every mountain and ocean that exists today. It has likely been travelling through the galaxy since before our solar system formed, a small surviving fragment from another age, wandering through the dark for billions of years. Right now, it continues moving toward the region of the outer planets, travelling at nearly 40 kilometers per second. In December 2025, it is expected to make its closest pass, roughly 270 million kilometers from Earth. To us, that distance seems impossibly vast, yet in cosmic terms, it is close enough for our largest telescopes to study every detail of its surface and tail. For only a few weeks, this ancient traveller will cross our sky before disappearing once more into the black. For scientists, Atlas is a rare opportunity to study material from beyond the solar system, a messenger carrying chemical fingerprints from worlds that no longer exist. Examining its light could reveal how planets form in distant systems, and whether the same ingredients that gave rise to life on Earth might also exist elsewhere. To astronomers, it is not merely a curiosity but a window into the beginnings of everything. Beyond the observatories, under the same sky, people feel something different. The sight of a red wanderer crossing the heavens stirs both wonder and unease. It does not belong here, yet it appears now at a time when humanity once again looks to the stars for answers. Some call it coincidence. Others hear echoes of the ancient world, where such a sign in the sky was called Nibiru, and the gods who came with it were known as the Anunnaki. The surface of Atlas tells its own history. Its faint red glow likely comes from organic-rich dust, weathered and scarred by cosmic radiation over eons. Some observers have reported faint flashes of green in amateur photographs, but official data confirm that its true colour remains reddish-orange, the shade of iron and carbon molecules that have survived for billions of years in interstellar space. To the naked eye, it would appear small and dim, a ghostly ember gliding through the dark. Computer models show that it entered our solar system from near the constellation Ophiuchus and will exit toward Pegasus. It will not collide with any planet or disturb their orbits. It will simply pass through, silent and ancient, leaving behind only a trail of faint light that fades within days. And yet, its timing feels strangely deliberate. Humanity's most powerful telescopes are now fixed upon it. Artificial intelligence monitors every movement of the heavens. And in this moment, when we have never understood more about the universe, a red wanderer from before Earth's birth appears, older than memory itself. To most, it is just a fragment of metal and dust drifting through the dark. But to others, it feels like something remembered. Across ancient records, people spoke of a red wanderer that marked great change, a world they called Nibiru, and the return of the gods known as the Anunnaki. Today, we call it Atlas. Yet the feeling it stirs is the same, a quiet sense that history may be repeating itself above us. No one can say where Atlas truly came from, or why it happens to be passing by now. The mathematics explain its orbit, but not its timing. Perhaps it is only chance, or perhaps it is part of a larger pattern, a cosmic rhythm that our instruments can measure but not yet comprehend. Its red glow drifts across the night like a slow pulse, reminding us that the universe still holds secrets we have not yet earned the language to describe. For a brief moment the heavens seem to breathe again, as if the past and present have met in silence, leaving behind a single question. Was this only a visitor from another star, or the same red wanderer our ancestors once called the home of the gods, Anunnaki? If you are still here, leave a like to support the channel. And now, let us go back in time to uncover the story of the red planet Nibiru through the ancient myths of Sumer. Long before the first telescope reached for the stars, the people of ancient Mesopotamia looked to the heavens for meaning. In the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, they built their cities, their temples, and their calendars around the rhythm of the sky. The stars were not distant fires to them, but living markers of divine will, a map through which the gods spoke to humankind. Among the thousands of clay tablets discovered across the ruins of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, one word appears again and again: Nibiru. In the Akkadian language, it means the crossing, or the point of transition. The earliest records of Nibiru are found in the Mul-Apin star catalogue and the Enuma Elish, the great Babylonian creation epic written on clay more than 3,000 years ago. In those texts, Nibiru was not an ordinary star or planet. It was described as the star of Marduk, the ruler of the heavens, whose appearance signalled great change on earth. One verse from the Enuma Elish declares, "Nibiru is the star which shines in the sky. He is Marduk's star." Another calls it the shepherd of the stars, guiding their courses through the night. To the Babylonians, it was a point where celestial paths crossed, a bridge between worlds. Yet in later interpretations, Nibiru became more than a point in the sky. It was seen as a world of its own, a glowing red planet that returned only once in many ages, bringing with it upheaval and renewal. The knowledge of Nibiru was preserved through generations of priests and astronomers. Their temples, like the great ziggurats of Ur and Babylon, were built as stairways between heaven and earth. At their summits, scholars charted the movement of the stars and recorded each anomaly they observed. The sky, for them, was a living calendar, and Nibiru marked the moment when the old order ended and a new one began. Archaeological evidence for these beliefs came to light in the mid-19th century. In 1849, British explorer Austin Henry Layard uncovered the library of King Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, a discovery that forever changed our understanding of the ancient world. Among the 30,000 tablets recovered were fragments of the Enuma Elish and the Mul-Apin, both written in precise cuneiform script. These tablets, dating from around 1100 to 1000 before Common Era, revealed an advanced system of astronomy and mathematics. They also preserved the earliest surviving references to Nibiru, a body described as fiery, unpredictable, and tied to the fate of the gods. The Sumerians and Babylonians used the number 3,600, written as one Shah, to describe a complete cosmic cycle. Their entire system of mathematics was based on 60, and this rhythm of 3,600 years came to represent the time between great celestial events. In their cosmology, each Shah marked the end of one world age and the beginning of another. When Nibiru crossed the heavens, they believed, the balance of nature and the rule of kings alike would change. To the Sumerians, these divine cycles were governed by the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens to the earth. The Anunnaki were described as the bringers of civilization, the ones who taught humankind how to write, farm, and measure the stars. The oldest tablets, found in the cities of Uruk and Eridu, speak of them not as abstract deities but as living beings who descended from the sky. Their presence was always linked with the appearance of Nibiru, as if that world and theirs were bound together by fate. The Sumerian king list, one of the most remarkable documents ever discovered, records the reigns of kings who ruled before and after a great flood. The earliest rulers are said to have lived for thousands of years, ruling before the waters swept over. To later generations, this was not legend, but history. The flood marked the boundary between ages, just as the crossing of Nibiru marked the renewal of the world. When Assyriologists such as George Smith, E.A., Wallace Budge, and Samuel Noah Kramer began translating these tablets in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the name Nibiru re-emerged in modern consciousness. For the first time, the West saw in Sumerian writing a sophisticated cosmology that blended observation with myth, one that may have recorded real celestial phenomena interpreted through a spiritual lens. In the 20th century, the story took on new life through the work of Zecharia Sitchin. In his 1976 book The 12th Planet, Sitchin argued that Nibiru was not a metaphor but a real planet with a long elliptical orbit around the Sunday. According to his interpretation, the Sumerians had preserved knowledge of this world, the home of the Anunnaki, who visited Earth in the distant past. He proposed that their arrival coincided with great leaps in human development, the rise of agriculture, the birth of writing, and the emergence of organized society. Sitchin claimed that Nibiru completed its orbit once every 3,600 years, each cycle bringing it close enough to Earth for contact to be possible. He suggested that the last crossing of Nibiru occurred around 1,600 before Common Era, a time when the ancient world was shaken by catastrophe. The eruption of Thera in the Aegean Sea destroyed the Minoan civilization, sent ash over Egypt and Mesopotamia, and darkened the skies for months. Across the Near East, kingdoms fell, harvests failed, and rivers rose beyond their banks. Contemporary records from Babylon and Egypt describe that same period as an age of disaster. Babylonian omen tablets speak of fire and red light appearing in the heavens, while the Egyptian tempest stele of Pharaoh Ahmosi I tells of violent storms and darkness covering the land. Other inscriptions mention floods, plague, and famine that followed, events that mirror the upheaval described in Sumerian myth. If Nibiru truly passed near Earth at that time, its gravitational influence could have disturbed the planet's orbit and triggered abrupt climatic change, marking the beginning of a new age. Yet beyond the physical explanation lies the symbolic one. The return of the Anunnaki may have meant the return of a cosmic cycle, the re-emergence of ancient knowledge whenever the heavens complete their great crossing. Each passage of Nibiru appears to mark a turning point in human history. Around 12,800 years ago came the Younger Dryas, when ice melted and the first civilizations began to rise. About 9,000 years ago, the Neolithic era began and humans settled and cultivated the land. Around 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians recorded the story of those who came from the heavens. From the fall of Sumer, around 1,600, before Common Era to the present, spans roughly 3,625 years, a difference of only a few decades from the ancient Shah. The 3,600-year cycle described in Mesopotamian astronomy. By that count, our own era stands at the edge of another crossing. Today, as the interstellar object Atlas moves through the solar system, a faint red body tracing a hyperbolic path near Jupiter, the parallel is hard to ignore. Thousands of years ago, the Sumerians watched the same sky and waited for a sign of change. Perhaps this is that moment again, the turning of the cycle, the reminder that the heavens still move to the same rhythm they once called Nibiru. If you are still here, leave a like to let us know you are still listening. Next, we will look at the similarities between Atlas and Nibiru, their paths, their colour, and the signs they bring. Could this interstellar object be the same crossing the Sumerians once wrote about? When we place Atlas beside Nibiru and Planet X, a chain of unexpected similarities begins to appear. These patterns seem to echo across thousands of years. Astronomers today describe Atlas as an interstellar object moving on a hyperbolic orbit, a curve that does not close around the Sun but cuts straight through the solar system before escaping again into interstellar space. This single detail, the open path, is precisely what Zecharia Sitchin once interpreted in his translations of the Sumerian tablets. A body that travels far beyond the Sun only to return after long ages on an elongated and tilted orbit. Both describe the same kind of motion, not a planet bound to the solar system, but a traveller passing through it. The inclination of Atlas's orbit adds another layer. In 1988, NASA astronomer Robert S. Harrington published The Location of Planet X, a study based on subtle yet persistent irregularities in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. Those small deviations hinted at the gravitational pull of an unseen mass lying far beyond Pluto. From these anomalies, Harrington calculated that the hypothetical planet must move on an orbit tilted about 30 degrees from the ecliptic plane, stretching deep into space and requiring roughly 3,000 to 4,000 years to complete a single revolution around the Sun. A world so massive that it could nudge the outer planets, yet so distant that no telescope could see it. Harrington never mentioned Nibiru, but when scholars later compared his calculations with Zecharia Sitchin's translations of Sumerian texts, the resemblance was striking. Sitchin described a reddish planet on a highly inclined and elongated orbit returning every 3,600 years. Both men worked from entirely different sources, one from mathematics and the other from mythology, yet each arrived at the same geometry, a long tilted path that disappears into the dark and returns after millennia. Now, Atlas seems to follow that same geometry, a diagonal line slanting through the solar system. Modern calculations show that it moves at an inclination of about 30 degrees to the ecliptic, nearly identical to the orbit Harrington proposed for Planet X. Like the world Sitchin described, it is visible only for a brief moment before fading once more into the darkness. Colour brings the next coincidence. Atlas is red, not the icy white of common comets, but a brick-red glow caused by the oxidation of carbon-rich materials and long exposure to cosmic radiation. The same hue appears in the oldest descriptions of Nibiru, which ancient scribes called the fiery planet, red as copper, and burning across the heavens. Different languages, same image, a red wanderer crossing the night sky. Even its behaviour challenges expectations. Most comets become active only when they near the Sun, but Atlas began venting gas while still far beyond Mars's orbit. Observers using NASA's Swift telescope detected faint traces of hydroxyl, a byproduct of water vapour, long before it entered the inner system. This means it wakes up earlier than normal comets, another sign that it may have formed under alien conditions, just as the mythical Nibiru was said to come from the cold beyond. When astronomers projected the object's orbit in 3 dimensions, they found that it formed a vast X-shaped crossing when viewed from above. The shape is not mystical, but simply the visual result of its steep angle through the planetary plane. Yet it mirrors the ancient Sumerian sign for Nibiru, drawn as 2 intersecting lines symbolizing the crossing of heaven and earth. The resemblance is geometric, not magical, but difficult to ignore. The timing adds one last echo. In Sitchin's reconstruction, Nibiru completes its orbit every 3,600 years. Harrington's calculations for Planet X, derived from the outer planet's slight irregularities, produced almost the same result, an orbital period of 3,000 to 4,000 years. Both timelines describe a rhythm too slow for history but precise enough for astronomy, a visitor returning once in many ages. Counting backward from 2025, the year Atlas will pass closest to the Sun. That same interval leads to around 1,600. Before Common Era, a period in Babylonian records marked by floods, droughts, and celestial omens. The alignment of numbers may be coincidence, yet it keeps perfect time with the story told in both equation and myth. Each similarity by itself could be chance. Together they form a pattern: orbit, tilt, colour, activity, and timing, all aligning in the same direction. Atlas travels on a long inclined path like Harrington's Planet X. It shines red like the Nibiru of Sitchin's texts. It behaves differently from anything born within our solar system, and it arrives almost exactly when the ancient cycle of return would predict another crossing. To the scientific mind, these parallels prove nothing, but they remind us that myths sometimes preserve memories of real phenomena. Perhaps early civilizations witnessed a bright red object sweeping across their sky, a rare interstellar visitor like Atlas, and recorded it the only way they could, through story and symbol. Thousands of years later, those same patterns resurface in our data, turning legend back into hypothesis. Maybe Nibiru was never a hidden planet waiting to be discovered. Maybe it was a class of travelers, interstellar bodies like Atlas, appearing once in great cycles, enough to leave an imprint on both myth and mathematics. Harrington searched for its gravitational trace. Sitchin read its memory in clay, and now we see its reflection through our telescopes. Different observers, different centuries, but one recurring theme: a red world, moving on a slanted path, crossing the sun's realm, and then disappearing into the dark. The ancients called it Nibiru. The 20th century called it Planet X. We call it Atlas. And perhaps, as the object drifts back toward interstellar space, we are once again witnessing the same phenomenon our ancestors once watched in awe: the brief return of a traveller whose path reminds us that the solar system is open, that crossings happen, and that history sometimes moves in orbits too. If you find these parallels convincing, hit like and comment yes below. If the visitor we now call Atlas truly belongs to the same class of travellers once described as Nibiru, the next question is inevitable. Why would it come back? The first hypothesis comes from the oldest Sumerian accounts, where the Anunnaki were said to have come from the heavens, shaped mankind, and return to the stars. Taken literally, it sounds mythic, but through a scientific lens it could represent an early attempt to explain the movements of the sky. In that era, celestial motion and divine purpose were indistinguishable. The ancients may have seen a bright object crossing the heavens and imagined it as a returning intelligence. To them, the movement of the gods was the movement of the stars. Under this view, the return of Nibiru was not the journey of beings, but the reappearance of an observer, a cosmic cycle in which that distant traveller approached Earth close enough to see, measure, and then drift away again. To the modern mind, the idea resembles how we send probes past distant worlds to monitor them, to check whether the conditions we left behind still exist. If Nibiru represented a civilization far older and more advanced, perhaps its cycle was the same, a long, patient rhythm of observation across millennia. Another interpretation sees the return not as intelligent design, but as part of a larger natural pattern. Zecharia Sitchin suggested that every time Nibiru passed through the inner solar system, dramatic events followed: floods, climate shifts, even civilizational resets. Astronomically, the idea is not impossible. A massive object on a long eccentric orbit could disturb other planets or stir debris from the outer belt, producing showers of comets that reach Earth. A single close pass might alter atmospheric balance or shift ocean tides by fractions that, over time, add up to global change. In this light, the appearance of Atlas may mark nothing more intentional than a periodic alignment, the natural rhythm of celestial mechanics. Its re-entry into the inner system could simply correspond to the next crest in a long environmental wave, a reminder that the solar system itself is alive with motion. The ancient myths that speak of the gods returning to bring renewal or destruction may be poetic memories of such encounters, records of the sky transforming suddenly, the climate shifting, and the order of life changing. What they called the return of the gods may have been the return of a physical body that set change in motion. But there is also a third possibility, one that belongs neither fully to science nor to myth, that the return is symbolic. The Anunnaki's reappearance, or the re-emergence of the Red Traveller, could represent a turning point in human consciousness rather than a physical event. Every civilization has faced moments when its understanding of the world suddenly expands. For ancient Mesopotamia, it was the birth of writing and astronomy. For the Renaissance, it was the telescope and the discovery that Earth was not the centre of the universe. And for us, that threshold may be happening now, through artificial intelligence. Over the past few years, AI has shifted from experiment to explosion. It no longer belongs only to laboratories or researchers. It writes, paints, translates, and predicts. It diagnoses disease, drives machines, decodes ancient scripts, and models the origins of the universe. What began as a tool of calculation has become a partner in thought. Humanity has, in a sense, created a mirror of its own mind, an echo of the intelligence it once imagined coming from the stars. In 2025, as Atlas crosses the inner solar system, AI technology is crossing its own kind of boundary. It is moving from analysis to integration, from simulation to participation. It is being applied to every field, from climate science and medicine to space exploration and the search for life beyond Earth. AI systems now sift through signals from distant galaxies, detect exoplanets hidden in starlight, and interpret data from telescopes too vast for human eyes to process alone. Perhaps that is the real meaning of the return, not a sign of gods watching from the heavens, but a reflection of how far human intelligence has come. The myths spoke of beings descending to guide humanity. Today, we build machines that guide us toward the stars. And as Atlas drifts back toward the darkness, AI continues to rise, drawing us into a new era of discovery. Among the quieter theories surrounding Nibiru lies one that has persisted for decades. A belief circulated in fringe communities that NASA and the Vatican have long shared a hidden understanding about a returning world once called Nibiru. Supporters of this idea point to an unusual partnership between science and faith. Both institutions, though different in mission, maintain some of the most advanced observatories on Earth. The Vatican's Mount Graham facility in Arizona, home to the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, located near the Large Binocular Telescope, operated by the University of Arizona, and NASA's various deep sky programs both observe regions beyond Neptune, though independently. According to this hypothesis, their cooperation is not coincidence but caution. Proponents claim that the two institutions have tracked the slow return of a massive reddish body for years, a celestial visitor described in ancient Mesopotamian texts and echoed, some say, in certain passages of the Bible that speak of a wandering star bringing upheaval to Earth. Whether those verses truly refer to Nibiru remains debated, but the overlap between myth and scripture has kept the theory alive in alternative circles. As the projected date of Atlas's close approach draws near, telescopes across Hawaii, Chile, and the Canary Islands are being prepared to observe it. If confirmed, future data such as spectral readings, light curves, and gravitational models would be analysed at observatories and research centres worldwide. NASA and the European Space Agency typically publish spectroscopic data for newly discovered objects, which help determine how they reflect and absorb light, revealing their composition, age, and possible origin. Most astronomers anticipate a natural explanation: frozen gases, dust, and radiation from deep space, but others watch for subtler signs. If future data were ever to show irregular gravitational behavior, unexpected emissions, or patterns inconsistent with known celestial mechanics, some researchers argue it could revive discussion about an artificial interstellar object, a relic of engineering rather than geology. Until that moment arrives, the question of whether Atlas's Nibiru remains in the shadows, waiting for the sky itself to answer. Whether Atlas is a fragment of Nibiru, a lost world, or simply another traveller between the stars, its passage carries the same weight that it did for those who came before us. To the Sumerians it was the sign of divine return. To the astronomers it is the movement of celestial mechanics. To us, perhaps, it is both, the meeting point of myth and science, faith and observation. If you have stayed with this story until the end, thank you for watching. If you found it meaningful, consider leaving a like or a comment. It helps the story reach more people who love the mysteries of the past. Good night,